board especially, and the 360 assessment. I attended the forum and I was really excited about a lot of the things that you had to say in terms of that forward thinking for Northglenn. So welcome. I haven't had the chance to have any of the Chief's barbecue, so I guess I've missed out. That's going to be on my agenda of stuff to do soon. I hope you and your family settle in, and yeah, just really excited to have you on board. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm scheduled to meet with the CCPP board very soon, within the next several weeks. So I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this evening. It's good to see you. Hopefully we'll see you out and about all the places. We'll meet up again.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting you all. And I can't wait till we get to meet in person.
Absolutely. And Chief, before you go, there was a plug. I think there was a request last week to bring back the red and blue competition. When is that happening?
Well, we're not having it this year, so it'll be 2022.
All right.
I get more practice so I can really beat those firefighters.
You got this. Okay. Thank you. All right. We are moving into public invited to be heard. This is an opportunity for public comment on any item not set for public hearing. Statements are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Joanna, is there anyone signed up to speak to council tonight?
I received 2 emails from residents that they would like read.
Okay.
Nobody else has signed up. I'm not sure if there's anyone on the phone line, so whichever order you would like to go.
Why don't you start with the emails?
Okay. Alrighty, the first one is from Christina Sharkady. To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter in reference to Shannon's participation on the CCPP board after being appointed to the council. As a CCPP board member, I would like Shannon to continue in her capacity on the board until she is permanently on the council. She has been an irreplaceable asset and has committed a great deal of her personal time to the training required for the post. I believe it would be a disservice to force her replacement before her council position is solidified. On a side note, I applaud the council for selecting her as the new Ward 4 member and know she will prove to be a productive and successful representative. Thank you, Christina Sharkady, Ward 3 representative for the CCPP. The second email is from Terry Thompson. My name is Terry S. Thompson. I am an at-large board member with the CCPP. I am writing this email to urge the City Council to allow Shannon Lukeman-Hiramasa to retain or leave open her Ward 4 CCPP representative spot until after November elections. While I am happy for the city as Shannon steps up to the plate to fill the recently open City Council position, I am saddened for our board. Shannon has been an integral part of our work so far. Shannon shows strong leadership, a willingness to work together, a focus on working to increase the strength of community-based policing, a high degree of professionalism, and a knowledge base to help us further our mission. Shannon has worked on a subcommittee to write bylaws and board norms to set up our board for success. Shannon is the first volunteer to attend events or to do board work. If Shannon is not fully elected to the City Council in November, which I hope she is because I live in Ward 4, we will have lost her valued presence on the CCPP board. I truly believe that Shannon will be an amazing City Council member, but if not elected, I know how important and of value she is to our board. Please allow her spot to continue or remain unfilled until the November election. Thank you for all you do for our city. I am certainly Northglenn proud.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to council? You can press *6 to unmute yourself at this time. Okay. Hearing none, we will move into communications. We'll start with Ward 1. Councilmember Peterson, how are you tonight?
I'm quiet because I couldn't find the mute button, but I'm wonderful, Mayor. Thank you for asking. And I'll keep it brief. I have nothing new to report for the good of the order.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I also have nothing this evening.
Councilmember Downing.
I will just go right along with Ward 1. I have nothing to report right now.
Councilmember Brown.
I do. I attended the inaugural celebration of our Pride Fest this weekend, and it was fantastic. I personally would like to thank the Youth Commission for showing up and really handling the process of distributing the headsets for the silent disco, which I danced with the mayor and it was awesome. She's really got some rhythm and some moves. I'd like to, I spend a lot of time talking to Deja there, and I just want to throw out just a great big hug to the members of the DICE board. Deja and her team did a fantastic job in getting this organized, getting the word out. It was a great event. I must say, though, it was the best music that we've ever had at a city event. It was great. Lots of fun. I met people from other cities who I took the time to speak to, and they spoke to me about how they wish that their city was as progressive as Northglenn is. It was just a really good time. I don't think I've danced that much in a really long time. It was great. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was my Saturday night. Enjoyed it. Can't wait till next year when we can allocate more money to it and plan, have more time to plan and get everything moving. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great ongoing tradition. So thank you everybody for putting that together. Deja, big shout out. Love you, girl. And thank you to my youth commission. Yeah, I'm a little owning them, but yeah, it was a great time.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to kind of follow up on the Pride activities that we had this month. We had a panel the week before our Pride event, Pride night, I guess it was called. And we had a lot of very positive comments and encouraging responses to the information that was given out during the panel. And I just wanted to thank all the panelists because they put themselves out there. They were very authentic and honest, and I really believe that they touched a lot of hearts. It was very meaningful evening for me. And then our Pride night on Saturday, as Councilmember Brown has mentioned, was a huge success. The weather actually worked out pretty well for us. We didn't really have a lot of rain during the event. And I wanted to thank all the volunteers who set up because apparently they did get rained on. So, but the thing that I found the most touching about our Pride night were the number of children from toddlers to teens who participated, were engaged and in, just enjoying themselves. And I think just the experience of being there and seeing how all the different types of people were being accepted and welcomed into our community is a huge benefit for everyone. We had people who just stopped by because they saw something happening and they didn't know what was going on. We had people who, had scheduled and reserved headphones weeks in advance and were thrilled to be there. And I would say that silent disco was so popular. Everybody who handed in headphones at the end of the day said that they had a great time with that. And I'm very impressed with our mayor and her dance moves and her courage on stage. So I do hope that we can expand and build on this in the years to come. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who helped make this happen.
Catherine, I have to let you know, I do have video of our mayor's dance moves, and I'm going to send them to Diana so that we can all enjoy our mayor's dance moves.
Well, Wayne actually took some too, so
you got it going on, girl.
Councilmember Duran-Mullica.
No updates for me tonight, but yes, thank you.
Where am I? Councilmember Luckman-Hiramasa.
Good evening, everybody. I don't have anything to report really, except for a couple of things. I mean, I did attend the swearing in of the new officers, so that was nice. I got to meet them and their families. 3 really nice human beings that are on board with the police department. So that was awesome to see and meet their families, especially from all over that came out to be there for them. Other than that, I'm just excited for the Ward 4 meeting that's happening next week and preparing for that. And thankful for everybody and the support that council has given me thus far. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start with a quick introduction. I know that many of you got to meet my daughter during a study session that we had when we were doing Ward 4 vacancy interviews, but I did, as you may have noticed, take a number of weeks off so that I could focus exclusively on her. But my daughter, Caroline May Wilford, was born on May 19th and was 6 pounds and 9 ounces and 19 inches long. And at 5.5 weeks, she is not sleeping through the night. So bear with me as I try and string sentences together. It's been a little rough, but we're getting there. And I am excited to be back. I am planning on attending council meetings more regularly now that we've gotten through these first couple of weeks. But thank you all so much for your kindness, as well as picking up the slack for me while I've been out. I've done the best to continue to answer resident calls and emails, but if there were any that slipped through the crack, know that I'll be combing back through my email in the coming week or so, and I'll definitely follow back up with you. So yeah, I'll be back in action, and you're going to see her for a little bit as well, because she is still so darn little. Outside of introducing my daughter, couple more details on the Ward 4 neighborhood meeting that Councilmember Lukeman Hiramosa just referred to. We're looking at Thursday, July 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. We'll be at Danahay Park, and we're going to have Kona Ice there. So we're trying something new out. And so anybody who comes in, certainly bring your family, bring your kids, bring a blanket to sit down on the lawn so that we can all try and huddle up in the shade where it's a little bit cooler. We'll have free energy kits. And then as far as the agenda for the meeting, we'll be taking some time to make sure that our new council member and Ward 4 representative is able to introduce herself to the community. And then we'll be talking about the new rec center opening plans and providing an update there, since that is such a huge thing for our community coming down the pipeline. We'll be talking about drought and water conservation, and then also talking about our upcoming comprehensive planning process and how residents can start to get involved and let us know how they want to be involved. So I hope everybody will come out and join us. It should be a lot of fun. So far, it's looking like it's not going to be 100 degrees. So I feel like we've already hit the lottery there. But yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody finally in person. We haven't had a ward meeting in person since 2019. So it's due. And I hope, again, everybody comes out with their friends and family. Bring a neighbor, go knock on a neighbor's door and bring them along as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So good to see this sweet little pumpkin. Wish I could squeeze her through the screen. Okay, I have a few things. I did attend the CML annual business meeting and voted for the CML executive board members. You can go to their website and find out who won in all the different categories. A highlight of my week was definitely Pride Night. When Miss Evelyn asks you to dance, you dance. Like, I went up there to say hello, and she's like, and your performance begins. So at least she danced with me, but that was a lot of fun. And I did make a public proclamation, probably a bit prematurely, but I was pretty certain that our community would support it when I stated that would not be our last Pride Night event. It was our first, but it would not be our last, because that was an amazing evening. I talked to so many residents that just kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. We've waited years for this, and we feel seen. And it was such a heartwarming evening. Huge thank you to the Dice Board, huge thank you to Youth Commission and our city staff. I mean, so many staff members, and I don't know that everyone knows, like they arrive early to set up, they stay late to take down, and they do it all. And they're amazing, and they're organizing it, and they're keeping it flowing and documenting it. Our communications team, it was just a lovely collaborative effort to really put on a nice evening. The silent disco, if you've never done that, is so much fun. I had no idea what to expect, but it's just a blast. And we even have some police officers that have some pretty good moves. They were in there dancing with the community. At one point, we had a huge dance circle on the lawn with, I don't know, 30 or more people. It was so fun. So it really was a celebration and a fun evening. So a huge thank you to everyone. And then I just want to plug 4th of July. So, again, thanks to Chief May for kicking us off and reminding us that fireworks off the ground, the big ones, the sparkler ones, whatever, they're illegal and you cannot use them. And we have a partnership with Westminster. Go see their fireworks. Thornton's really close by. Go see their fireworks. We are reserving ours for the rec center opening. So we will still have fireworks in our city in the very near future when we celebrate the opening of our rec center. However, we have so many fun events planned for the 4th of July. So please look on our Facebook page, on all our social media, look at the website. We have events all throughout the day in different locations throughout the city. So there might be an event that you can actually walk to with your family. I will be kicking off the day at the Classic Car Show that will be in E.B. Rains Park. So first thing in the morning, we're going to start there, and that's going to be really fun. We have some amazing classic cars in our city and also in neighboring cities, and they've signed up to compete for the best. So please join me there. And then we are celebrating at different parks throughout the day. So we would love to see you out and about. My goal is to get to every single event during the day. So if you happen to come find me and say hello. So I'm real excited about that, but just one final plug. No fireworks, please, please, please. It's not worth it. It's not worth the fine, and it's not worth the trauma that is caused to your neighbors and all of our pets. So I really appreciate that. Here we go. City Manager Geyer.
Just one quick thing for you, Mayor and Council, this evening. Last week, Rupe and I were able to attend the Colorado City County Management Association, which is our state conference of city county managers in Glenwood Springs. Well over a year. It's been 2 years since I've seen many of my colleagues. And it was wonderful to reconnect with everyone. I spoke on a couple panels, but one of the highlights was just the number of colleagues coming up to me unsolicited saying, oh, I've been watching what's happening in Northglenn. I love what you all are doing. You're doing such amazing things. And so that was a really fun, just fun dynamic and getting to share more, because there were a lot of questions about, what are you doing with Dice Board? What are you doing with CCPP? And so many other of the amazing work that's being done. So I thought I'd share that with you all. Offer kudos to all of you as our governing body, and just know that it's being noticed throughout the state. So keep up the great work.
Oh, and that made me think of one more thing. I forgot to thank Commissioner Baca. So Commissioner Lynn Baca came because Adams County co-sponsored our event and helped us pay for, I believe, the silent disco. And so it was very fun to have her with us. And she did tell me that she was going to wear her Northglenn Pride t-shirt at her meeting tomorrow. So we could look at that and see how Northglenn's represented.
Glen was the first Pride event in Adams County.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilmember Brown?
I just wanted to ask a question of probably Heather. Heather, do we have enough leftover shirts that we could have Susan get them or put them in our mailboxes so the council members that were unable to make the event could get their Northglenn Pride shirts?
Let me check with Stephen. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
check with Stephen tomorrow, and then I'll send you an email.
Thanks. I got mine. Yeah, I wore it today. So I have mine, but I just know that other council members would love to have one.
Yeah, absolutely.
City Attorney Hoffman, how are you?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm doing well. I do not have anything to report tonight.
Okay. City Clerk Small, how are you?
I am well, thank you. I also have nothing to report tonight.
Okay. All right, we're moving on. One item on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Lukman Hiromasa.
Yes.
I will close that vote and the consent agenda passes unanimously.
Okay, moving into ordinances on first reading. CB 1972. Joanna, will you read the title?
A bill for a special ordinance amending the 2021 budget, recognizing revenues and appropriating expenditures by supplemental appropriation for the payment of the costs and expenses of the municipal government, agencies, and offices of the City of Northglenn, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, Jason Loveland, our Director of Finance, is here to provide a summary. Hi, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. As you know, we adopt the annual budget, and then from time to time need to make adjustments to that budget, depending on various circumstances. This supplemental appropriation touches on two projects. One is in the Conservation Trust Fund for enhancements to the Greenway Trail, specifically to connect the trail to the RTD station at 112th and York Street. An additional $40,000 from the Conservation Trust Funds being requested to complete that project. And then secondly, in the Water Fund, water meter ERTs. This is the device that helps us read the meters and get a good read for our water billing system. Several of those are beginning to fail, and to expedite the replacement cycle on that process, an additional $250,000 is being requested to complete that replacement of an additional 1,100 ERTs during 2021. So that's kind of the summary of the two budget items being requested on this supplemental appropriation. And if approved, a public hearing would be held on July 12th. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jason? Seems pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Of course.
Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Downing,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Yes.
Councilmember Lukman Hiromasa.
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1972 on first reading passes unanimously.
Great, thanks. All right, CB 1973. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for an ordinance amending Article 4 of Chapter 9 of the Northglenn Municipal Code by the addition of a new section 9-4-16 concerning prevention of passage to and from a religious facility.
Motion to approve.
Second.
City Attorney Hoffman is here to provide a summary.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, members of council. This ordinance is modeled after other legislation that's been upheld in various courts that creates essentially a buffer zone, in this case around religious facilities. It is designed to balance the rights of those folks that still want to protest potentially in front of a religious facility, balance that right, that First Amendment right, with the right of those people that want to be able to go in unimpeded into the religious institution or facility. Certainly there have been religious institutions in the city that have had some significant interruption in their ability to do what they want to do without having entrance to their facilities impeded. And so this creates that buffer zone while still allowing those folks that want to protest to be able to do so, but balancing the right of people to enter unimpeded.
Any questions? Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. So Corey, my question is, what do we have? Is there a statewide or federal definition of religious institution that we're using? Or how do we, if it's, does it have to be a certain number of, members? Does it have to, could it be in someone's house or, what are we using?
Well, the definition is actually in the ordinance. And it's defined as a facility that operates for the advancement of a theological philosophy and practices the rituals associated with the beliefs, faith, or creed of a religious society, congregation, or religious denomination. It does not take any number of specific people. So this could be theoretically operated in any number of locations, and there's no minimum number of people that are required for it to constitute a religious facility or institution.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, I was looking through the memorandum, and I guess I didn't get far enough into the ordinance actually itself. So, but I think it's helpful for our residents to understand, what we're doing here as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Brown?
Hi, I just want to say that I am in total support of this. I know that we have some residents that aren't as willing to let some people go to our organizations. So I really do appreciate this coming before us, and I definitely think it's something important that we need to do for our community.
Councilmember Duran-Mullica?
Yeah, I'm going to be real brief. I really want to just, express the same encouragement as Becky did. Thanks, Corey, for working on this. I think that this is long overdue for our community, and anybody who wants to practice whatever religion they choose in this city should have the right to do so peacefully. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would also like to express my support because I know this has been an issue for some of the residents, and they're trying to protect their religious beliefs in the city, as well as that fine balance between First Amendment rights and religious rights. I think this strikes a good balance. My question was the same about the definition of a religious entity. It doesn't specify, could someone say their home is a religious entity as well? So that was one question I had, maybe to get a little bit more clarification. And then second, what are the plans maybe for, upholding this and enforcing this and making sure that this is actually going to be helpful for these religious organizations too? Thank you.
It could theoretically be in a residence, depending on, so long as it is compliant with our zoning. So it is purposely intended to be broad. In terms of enforcement, it is, I'd characterize it as another tool in the toolbox. When the city had some previous incidents that were impacting one of our religious facilities, we did have an ordinance that made it illegal to block the right of way. And so when people had to enter the facility, they actually had to go around an individual protesting into the street to get into to then make their way into the institution. So this makes it a little more direct of an offense if we have the same circumstance where we don't have to see someone actually go into the street and cause themselves danger in order to get into the facility. This is just a more direct way to enforce it if we need to.
Thank you, Corey. That's great.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is pretty similar to my colleague, Councilmember Lukman Hermosa. I'm so sorry. I promise I will pronounce your name correctly. Corey, I'm curious. So, how is this noticed? Are there going to be a sign like 100 feet outside of any religious facility? Like how is this noticed? Is it just one of those sort of things where like it's noticed when you're standing in front of the judge, or I mean, I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, no, there is no signage requirement or obligation. Certainly a religious facility could, if it chose to do so, place signage identifying the 8-foot buffer zone. But this legislation is actually modeled after legislation that protects women's reproductive rights clinics. It's the same sort of bubble, and there's no requirement for signage for that. Again, if there is an incident that the police respond to, they'll be able to provide the education as necessary and enforcement as necessary, but there is no specific notice or signage required.
Okay, that makes total sense. Thank you for that explanation. And I also agree with previous comments that this is definitely necessary. Thank you.
All right, Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Downing?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Goff?
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukman Hiromasa?
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1973 on first reading passes unanimously.
All right, CB 1974. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A bill for an ordinance amending section 10-17-5 of the Northglenn Municipal Code, amending the International Existing Building Code 2018 edition, as previously adopted by reference by the city, by the addition thereto of new subsections J and K.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, our Director of Planning and Development, Brooke, is here to provide a summary of this item. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and welcome. I just want to say, Mayor and Council, that this request also is modeled after another community in terms of providing accommodation for cold weather care programs in religious institutions. We did make one modification in working with the fire department and the building division, that the version that we were working off of had set a percentage of area that a religious institution could use for cold weather care program. Here, what we did was just sort of expand on that and put a number to it rather than a percentage, because it can be very difficult for a religious institution to understand how to do the calculation. And so by providing this, I think we've created more flexibility than what we used as the model template for this ordinance. In addition to the ordinance itself, I included administrative provisions that would otherwise be overseen by the fire department, which essentially puts in a process that ensures that there'll be adequate life safety protections in place while a cold weather program is occurring inside a religious institution. And this is the widely recognized program that typically occurs through the months of October and into March, and then also is when when it gets to a certain temperature outside. So this is merely intended to provide the means in which I believe several of the religious institutions may already be participating in, and this helps them do it in a legal manner. With that, I'll open up to any questions.
I don't see any hands. Councilmember Duran Malika.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm not really sure if it belongs in this area or not, but really, when you were looking at other cities who do these cold weather shelters, I see that you have all of these, different things that they need to consider. Oh, did I go out? Oh. But one of the things that I was curious is, do they have any specific policies around like safety? So I see that fire is definitely covered in here. Do they have particular like safety protocols that they have to follow, or other health protocols that they follow? I'm just kind of curious since I haven't come across.
Sure. So the provisions that are provided in there is essentially for a fire watch program where they have to have a person who's formally trained in doing fire watch and also have at least one person awake during the overnight time period that's also formally trained. They need to have an emergency plan in terms of evacuation. Essentially what you're seeing there is the administrative provisions to ensure that they're providing the minimum life safety. I will tell you that there aren't very many communities that have provisions like this in place. So it's sort of a bleeding edge issue right now in terms of figuring out how can we make this happen and happen in a safe manner.
Okay. Can you also answer this question? So assigned for fire watch, and you said that person has to be trained. What does that training consist of? And I've never heard of a fire watcher before.
Sure. So I can provide a little bit more detail on the second reading, but as a general rule, this is something that the fire department would require in the event that what we're trying to do is apply means and methods that the fire department does for other types of construction projects in a manner that would otherwise allow this to occur. So typically a fire watch is when you have to take your sprinkler system down inside an occupied space. So say for instance, for a hotel, when the Delta Marriott was doing the remodel, they had to take certain floors of the sprinkler system offline in order to do certain work. So what typically is required is that you need to have a person who is essentially trained to be able to, like a security guard, to be basically on each floor where there is no fire protection in place to ensure that if there is a fire, one, they know what to do in the event of a fire, i.e. pull a fire alarm or assist with evacuation, or two, notify the authorities to do that. So, but I can get you a more specific answer as to how the fire department would consider applying that in this instance. But what we're trying to do is apply other means and methods that are used in different circumstances to this in order for it to occur.
Okay, great. I think that's just helpful, just for background, and and maybe Heather, outside, since this idea is outside of the scope of this resolution, one of the things I was thinking is how can the city support organizations who want to have a cold weather shelter in the appropriate training they need, and things like that. I don't know what that looks like or what that process entails, but is there something that we could do to help support those folks who want to have these cold weather shelters so that they can meet this requirement? So thank you so much. I
think just to help answer part of that question, the fire, if we have folks who reach out, community or institutions that reach out to us, we will definitely work with them in the fire department to help get them trained up to understand what those requirements mean and how they actually apply. And as I understand it, and I'm not well versed in cold weather care program, but I believe that's already part of the cold weather program operational logistics that they have in place. So I think any institution that's currently operating, this will not seem like new news to them.
Oh, okay, good to know. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brooke, you may or may not know the answer to this question, but is there any reason why this is written just to be for cold weather months?
Yeah, I think because what we're trying to do is avoid what I would call otherwise a slippery slope, and really trying to narrow what otherwise is not really widely endorsed in the fire and life safety community as an appropriate use for a religious institution. Even with sprinkler system, if there's a fire in an assembly rated building, it's typically to get people out as quickly as possible and not in an overnight condition where people may be sleeping. So we are really trying to figure out how best to make this work. And it's very pilot oriented in the sense that there's not a lot of other codes out there or communities that are even considering this type of flexibility in the code. So we're kind of pioneering here into this, venturing into where we are right now.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's a really great place to start. I'm not going to push that we, expand this and make this year round, but I was just curious for a little bit of background context because I know that there can be extreme weather events, out even in the summer and even in the fall. I mean, we've had flooding happen in the past, which certainly would have an impact upon individuals experiencing homelessness. And so I think that's something that we can potentially tackle later on is, are there other instances in which, we could activate this particular building code, amendment so that it's not in place all of the time. Because I feel really strongly that any opportunity that we have for contact is an opportunity for case management and an opportunity to eliminate barriers and get folks off of the streets. So that's just my 2 cents, and maybe something that the Homelessness Task Force can take a look at. And then I know that another piece for the Homelessness Task Force to think about is passing this ordinance, is there going to be any sort of heads up to the city that, X, Y, and Z religious institution is going to be, hosting a cold weather temporary program in their building. So just another thing to think about later on, but I support this as is. Thanks for your work on it, Brooke.
Those were really great questions. Thank you for coming forward. So I don't see any more hands. So Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Downing?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Goff?
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yeah.
Councilmember Lukman-Hiromasa?
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CB 1974 on first reading passes unanimously.
All right, resolution CR 65. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving an agreement between the City of Northglenn and Colorado Civil Infrastructure Incorporated for the 112th Avenue and Irma Drive Drainage Improvements Project.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, Kent Kisselman, Director of Public Works, is here to provide a summary. Hi, Kent, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Good evening. Yes, so this area is 112th Avenue. And if you're familiar with the area, what happens is in the spring and heavy rains, the ditch overflows and the stormwater flows to the south side and floods into the backyards of those neighbors. And we've kind of, over the last few years since the project was instituted, tried to Band-Aid it and do some different things. And it's become kind of a mess where we finally just had to, redo the project in a sense of this area. So this area really encompasses from Irma Street to the west to about Larson, where if you've driven on 112th on that south side, you'll see that there's really no curb and gutter. It's more of a ribbon curb. And that was to allow the original flow to go where it originally was going. And I know that's kind of poor wording, but now we're going to curb that line and direct that to the east, and we're going to install some storm drain inlets and further pipe that flow down to Irma, and then it'll capture into our existing storm sewer system, and then it should take care of the problem. In addition, they'll be removing, the rocks that we've placed back there and doing some new landscaping and revegetation and stuff. So we received 6 bids, and with the lowest responsible bidder based on the information that we reviewed and our consultant reviewed was Colorado Civil Infrastructure, and that bid was $225,959. And we recommend approval of this resolution as proposed, and I'll answer any questions.
Councilmember Brown.
Kent, thank you for taking care of this for us. And I know that those of us that live on this side of the town are quite happy to hear it. I have a question for you, and maybe I missed it, but this will also take care of the drainage issue right there on the east side. It would be the northeast corner of Irma and 112th, right there adjacent to the gas station. You know where?
Yes, the entire intersection of Irma will be new curb and gutter and ADA ramps. You know, so that'll all get new curb and gutter and be captured in there with some new storm drain inlets.
Thank you. Thank you so much for getting this going, Heather. And I appreciate the work that you did, Kent.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Kent? Okay. Joanna, will you call the vote, please?
Mayor Leidy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Yes.
Councilmember Witkovich?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Downing?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Goff?
Yes.
Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukman Hiromasa?
Yes.
I will close that vote, and CR 65 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, discussion items. We have 4 tonight. The first one is the Northglenn Civic Center Phase 1 Implementation June Update. Amanda Peterson, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services, will provide an update. Amanda, would you like me to project the photos now or after you do an intro?
You can go ahead and project those now. That would be great.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So update tonight, there's no change in the schedule or the budget. So that's always great news.
Oh, no.
Amanda froze for a second. Well, we can all just look at this awesome photograph. There's 2 of them. Those lights are really cool. Ah, you're back on a new screen.
Sorry about that. Am I back again?
You are.
Lovely. Technology. So with our
Oh no. Now, I don't know about you. I have 2 frozen Amandas.
Maybe we'll get a third.
I know.
I'm going to have to snap a picture of that and send it to her.
I don't think I want to know.
Hi. Wait, which
all of your frozen images are beautiful.
It's like a snapshot in time.
Yeah. Well, I know she wants to share with us. Let's try it one more time, see where she lands. City Manager Geyer, what do you recommend?
I would say let's jump to Ed and Jen and give Amanda some time to see if she can get reconnected.
Okay.
If that's okay with you, we'll jump to the next discussion item. And because I know Amanda has amazing, great, fun things to share with you. So.
I think she was back for a second.
Amanda, are you back?
I am. I'm on a second device here. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, you can.
All right. I'm not sure what's going on today. As I was saying, we have our grand opening celebrations planned for October 6th through 9th with a ribbon cutting on the evening of October 6th. So if everybody would like to start saving that date, official save the date notices will be going out soon. And then we'll have some friends and family events on the 7th and 8th, and a public festival complete with fireworks on October 9th. And I know that several of the Ward 4 council members mentioned the Ward 4 meeting next week. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get to provide that update. We've got a Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting the same night to interview our Ward 3 for our Ward 3 vacancy, but Diana has graciously offered to step in for me, so she'll be providing the update that evening. We can jump to those photos because that's always the most exciting part. You can see on this slide, we've got our south lobby areas. So this is the theater and senior center entry. I'm just really starting to see all of that come together. That's the bar and box office space on the upper left. And that is one of the lobby spaces on the lower right. And you can move on to the next screen. This is our senior activity room and community room. Again, you can just see those spaces really starting to come together. That room is going to seat about 240 people at round tables when it's complete as one large space, or we'll be able to break it into 3 smaller spaces. The bottom left photo there is of the patio that is accessible off of each of those 3 rooms. You can go to the next. This is our preschool space. So you can see those bright pops of color in each of the 2 classrooms, as well as the workroom that's in between. And then the bottom right photo shows the playground starting to come together. So that has an agricultural theme that our preschoolers selected. So you can see the barn play structures in place. We've got some other fun play structures that'll be going in very soon. Can go on to the next. This photo shows a little glimpse of the solar array in place on the roof of the kind of center portion of the building, right over the fitness and gymnasium areas. You can go to the next. Little shot of some of our exterior finishes on the top left there. You start to see the entryway sign coming together. On the top right, you can see the slide coming out of the pool area. And then the bottom 2 photos show the back, kind of the back portion of the building, some of the work being completed back there. Can go to the next. Gym flooring is going in, and actually since that photo, all of that wood you see stacked in the back of the room, almost all of it was in place when I was in the building late last week. So that was exciting to see. You can go on to the next photo. This is that fitness area upstairs along with our indoor track. You can see the railing going around. Those windows to the left are overlooking the pool. Next slide. Theater starting to, again, more and more finishes coming into play. On the top left is our rehearsal room, which is really exciting for us because that allows us space to be able to have something performing on stage and something else rehearsing in the rehearsal space. Next slide. Our pool mechanical room, all new upgraded equipment, which after the last week we had with Kiwanis, although a different facility, staff is extremely excited for. Can move on to the next. I thought is there one more? Yeah, or is that the last one?
That's the
all
last
right.
one.
So that is all I have for you this evening. Again, I apologize for the technical glitches. I'm not sure what was happening there, but glad we were able to get through that. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Amanda, it's not really a question, but during the Pride night, as it got dark, I could see that all the lights were on. I don't know about all the lights, but a lot of the lights were on in the new rec center and that main entrance area there, and it just looked beautiful. I mean, anybody driving by is going to certainly have their eye caught by our wonderful new rec center. So thank you for this presentation tonight and all your hard work on this project.
Thank you. Our architects did a great job of highlighting and really highlighting that view from Community Center Drive as well as from I-25.
Any other questions or comments for Amanda? Councilmember Brown?
Amanda, congratulations on keeping this project on budget. I mean, the numbers look really, really good. You've done a great job at that, and I really do appreciate it, as do our residents. So thank you so much for keeping an eagle eye on that.
Of course. That was how we started the project and sent that message very clear to the entire team, and they've done a good job of supporting it.
Absolutely. I also saw it Saturday night a couple times, and I just stood there and just looked at it in awe. It is beautiful. It is simply beautiful.
Awesome. Well, Amanda, thank you for being here. It's always fun to see updated photos of the progress inside. Thanks for spending the time tonight.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great night.
Okay, we have our 2021 legislative session recap. City Manager Geyer will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Part of our partnership with our lobbying team is to provide you with an end of session legislative recap, as the Mayor mentioned. So we have Jennifer Castle and Ed Bowditch with us this evening, and they've got a short PowerPoint for you to walk you through the highlights of this past session. As been mentioned by many of our legislative committee members throughout the session, it's been a busy session, a lot of different highlights. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen and Ed. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather, Madam Mayor, and council members. Thank you for having us this evening. We certainly appreciate it. And Madam Mayor, I just realized this. I have some transitions in my PowerPoint, so you might have to hit.
Oh.
So I apologize. I just realized that.
I think they send it to me in a PDF. So it's,
okay.
It's not, yeah, it should
perfect. Okay, that's perfect. Great. Okay. So to give you a recap of the 2021 legislative session, as you all can imagine, it was a little bit different this year. Things definitely looked different when we were in the Capitol. We took about a month-long break in there as well too. So the legislature, they did start up in January. They took about a month break, and then they ultimately just convened June 8th. So just a couple of weeks ago. They could have gone until June 12th, and they actually ended early. One of the first times in my memory that the legislature actually ended early. A couple of highlights and just things to point out, Madam Mayor, if you could scroll down to the next slide, please. Just some quick facts here. So the Democrats do hold majorities in both the House and the Senate. Given the 2020 election. We haven't seen any change in the makeup except in the Senate, where the Democrats did gain one Democratic seat. This is the most diverse legislature that we have ever had, and it seems to be getting more diverse every year. That relates to age, race, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, all of the above. So very, very diverse, and you can certainly tell with some of the legislation that was introduced this session just how diverse the chambers were. We saw a total of 623 bills that were introduced this year. You can see how that compares to some years in the past. I personally felt like there were a ton of bills, more than 623 bills that were introduced. 502 of those bills were passed. A lot of those bills are getting signed by the governor as we speak. He is on his bill signing tour currently. He has 30 days after the last day of session to sign or veto or let some of those bills become laws without his signature. Only 121 bills were killed. That is a very small number. I will say that there were a lot of bills that were passed this year, and a very few number of bills that were killed. Continuing down, please. Couple of the things that we saw a lot of themes that were happening down at the Capitol, and a lot of that kind of had to do with these three topics that really intersected. Obviously, we have the increasing Democratic majority. Colorado is turning blue, or I guess I would argue it already is blue. Maybe it's turning more blue. A lot of national issues that are happening in DC that trickle down to Colorado. and then also the theme of equity and inclusion. And we really saw a lot of topics and issues, and just kind of the overall vibe of the legislature was really around these three things and how these three topics kind of, were gelled together, how they kind of, acted as one. So some things we saw that very much tied into these three themes. And then some priorities I'll let Ed speak about here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everybody. Some of the specific priorities for the Democratic Party, addressing issues with regards to taxes and fiscal policy, transportation funding. Our own Senator Faith Winter led the charge on doing a lot of stakeholder work before the session, working on a comprehensive transportation funding measure. There were also a lot of bills on environmental and energy issues and social policy issues as well. The next two slides show the COVID relief programs. There was one on the state level. So the state had some additional one-time funds. You can see that on the next slide. The state focused its one-time funds on strengthening small businesses, revitalizing infrastructure, supporting Colorado families, and investing in rural Colorado. And then the larger amount of money coming from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, economic recovery, housing needs, victims assistance, and still a lot of money yet to be determined. In terms of specific major policy bills, I mentioned the transportation funding bill, the state public option health system plan that generated a huge amount of controversy at the Capitol. The public option component of that bill was removed, but the bill passed, requiring reductions in health insurance rates, gun control measures, especially after the tragedy in Boulder, as well as some other things. The next slide shows kind of the line of the state tax revenues. You can see what happened a year ago and what a much better place we are in today rather than a year ago. We are very pleased that the state tax revenues really took that one-time blip, but have bounced back very strongly. In fact, so strongly that at last week's revenue estimates, the state is now projecting pretty significant Tabor refunds for the next few years. So that's the next challenge the state will face. The next slide shows some budget highlights. Again, a lot of the budget cuts from a year ago have been restored, and the state started building back some investments in education and healthcare. Jen's going to talk about some specific issues of interest to Northglenn.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So if we move down to the next slide, so these issues are the issues that Ed and I, that we track down at the Capitol on behalf of the city. These issues are all in our legislative policy document that the legislative committee produces every year. So just so that you can see kind of the broad expanse of the issues in which we are involved, and those issues that we do track as well too. So quite a few. I will say though that this year really focused on three kind of main topic points that Ed and I wanted to discuss and highlight some of those bills that really became important to the city. So the first one that I wanted to point out, and this one is going to be on the next slide here, is law enforcement. So obviously, as I mentioned before, and some of this you might kind of remember the slide that I mentioned, some of the themes that are playing out in Colorado. This one very much so was an issue that trickled down to Colorado from the national scene. So we did see a lot of bills as it related to decriminalizing offenses, trying to get people out of jail, not punishing people for their inability to pay, those kind of issues. So we did see many bills. One of note, the one bill that did pass, this was kind of dubbed as the Senate Bill 217 cleanup bill, which had to do with law enforcement transparency and such, was House Bill 1250. This bill, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think this bill passed within one of the last couple of days of the legislative session. but it expands data collection. It requires body cameras to be on when entering certain facilities. All peace officers have to have body cams, et cetera. The one good thing about this bill is that it did push back the deadline for law enforcement to meet some of those requirements. And that was an effort that we did work with CML on as well. Some of the other bills that did give us some concern, especially with Chief May as well, did not move forward. So that was good for us. The other main area down on the next slide here is the environment. Ed hit on this a little bit earlier, but really a really big push to try to codify greenhouse gas reduction goals into statute, trying to really have a focus on renewable energy and renewable energy projects, modernizing our utilities, our transmission lines. So we did see a few bills that the city did engage that did pass. Ultimately, this was, I believe, the very last bill that passed in the House, 1266, the Environmental Justice Bill. Excuse me. The bill does a few things, but essentially the AQCC, the Air Quality Control Commission, has to set certain rules for greenhouse gas reductions, especially as it relates to the oil and gas sector and energy utilities, as well, excuse me, as making sure that disadvantaged communities are involved in rulemaking as it relates to any of those rules that the AQCC puts into place. And then the last issue that we had wanted to discuss on the next slide here is transportation. Ed also mentioned this as well too. This was huge. We knew this bill was going to come. We knew the 2021 session was going to have a big focus on a very grand transportation sustainability financing plan. As he mentioned, Senator Faith Winter worked with a lot of stakeholders prior to this bill being introduced. This is Senate Bill 260. This bill is going to provide over $5 billion to our transportation system. It essentially does that by increasing or creating a number of fees and then allocating those fees to state and local roads, highways, and a big emphasis on multimodal projects around the state as well too. One other bill that I will note is House Bill 1186, which is a bill that came from the RTD Accountability Study Group, makes various administrative changes to RTD, and something that we watched and that one of our council members participated very heavily in as well. So while those three things definitely had our attention, there were other bills of interest as well too. Just kind of wanted to throw these out there so that you can see some of them. A lot of them, a majority of these bills did pass, all of them passed, and a majority of them we did support. A few that I wanted to note that the city really embraced and were very supportive of House Bill 1075, which replaces the term illegal alien with worker without authorization in public contracts. House Bill 1105. This bill provides assistance for utility payments. And we actually worked with our other delegation member, Representative Kyle Mullica, to add water as a utility based on some concerns that he was hearing from the city. Unfortunately, we were not successful with one bill, House Bill 1314, that would remove the ability of a municipal court to place an outstanding judgment warrant on someone's driver's license. So unfortunately, we were not able to stop that one, but Corey was very much involved in that one on behalf of the city. We worked with CML, and ultimately just something that we could not fight back against. But hopefully there could be some things that could come in the interim or maybe next year to maybe soften the bill a little bit. And then let's see. And yeah, those were just kind of all the bills that I wanted to mention. The city of Northglenn did take positions on other bills as well too. And we can certainly share that full bill report for the full council if needed. And I'll turn it back over to Ed.
finally, just to summarize, I think Jennifer and I are finishing our second year representing Northglenn, and we are very proud to work with all of you. Just throughout the year, we're always on call for members of the city staff during the sessions and during the interims. When we see interim committee bills, we review all legislation of interest to the city, and we forward that to the legislative committee, communicate with our Northglenn legislators and other Adams County legislators, and we work with our various stakeholders throughout the year, CML, CCI, other municipalities, and finally, we help coordinate and participate social events to build and maintain relationships with legislators. So that's kind of our summary from tonight. On that last slide, you can see our contact information, and we're always happy to connect throughout the year on any of these issues.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Goff has the first question. There she did. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button and muted my video instead of the audio. I just wanted to thank both Jennifer and Ed for all their hard work. This is a great summary of what we've looked at and worked on during the past year. But I also wanted to put in a little plug for CC4CA because our participation in that organization really has helped both Northglenn and also I think the state of Colorado in terms of the environmental issues and bills that we were able to get passed here in Colorado. So just to let our residents know that we are a member of the CC4CA, and it's worth being a member of that group because it really does give voice to environmental concerns and safety for all of our residents here in Colorado. And that's really all I wanted to say. So thanks again, Ed and Jennifer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
I also wanted to add on to Councilmember Goff's thank you. Ed and Jennifer, you both have just been so tremendously helpful and just on top of absolutely everything in our work with you. So I just want to say thank you. I know that the session was totally bananas and you all did such a great job of just kind of cutting through everything and really helping us focus in on the bills that really could impact our city and that we should be spending our time on and advocating on. So thank you so much for doing that and doing it well. And to Catherine's point about CC4CA, I completely agree. The organization has just really grown their influence as you know at the state level. As evidenced by the amount of bills that they played a key role on. And, you know, Catherine and I both serve as liaisons to CC4CA, and I know that we tend to report what's happening at CC4CA back to the legislative committee. But if there ever is appetite or interest from council to hear more of an in-depth update on what's going on at CC4CA, in a more condensed manner instead of kind of more piecemeal just as it happens, know that I would certainly be interested, and I assume Catherine might be interested in helping share that update as well. I don't want to speak for you, but anyway, to wrap it up, thanks again, Jen and Ed. You both are fantastic, and we're very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you very much for your thorough presentation tonight. Jenny, I think it'd be really nice if you would explain to the community what CC4CA is. I think you can do it better than me, since we are part of the organization we support. So I'd appreciate if you would do that, please.
Is that okay, Mayor Leidy?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think because we just use acronyms, and I don't think, you know, there are probably people that have no idea what we're talking about.
You know what, it's a great reminder. Thank you for that. So yes, CC4CA is Colorado Communities for Climate Action. And the organization is a coalition of, I think, over 38 local governments across the state that advocate for stronger state and federal climate policy. The organization is governed by a board of directors that represents all of the membership communities and is also guided by a policy document that is unanimously agreed upon by all of the 38 local governments that are members from across the state. And just one last note, that the organization's jurisdictions represent nearly a quarter of the state's population. So they're definitely growing in size and in power, and are very, very much a player down at the Capitol in terms of being a voice for climate resiliency as well as climate action. And one of the reasons that we had initially joined CC4CA is because as a small community in Northglenn, we can certainly take climate action, but as with many things and almost everything else that we work on, we're stronger when we work more regionally with other local governments and put our heads together to develop the best strategies and policies, which is what CC4CA is very good at. So I hope that's helpful, Becky. Is there anything else I can answer for you?
No, I just wanted to make sure that our residents understood, because we say it so fast and, they probably have no idea what it was until now. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Well, thank you both for your work year round, but also for spending the evening with us and bringing us up to speed. That was very helpful, actually. So thank you.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, we are moving to the COVID-19 update and resuming in-person city council meetings, believe it or not. All right, so City Manager Geyer is going to take the lead here. I will pull up your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. And if you want to go to the second slide, feel free.
Okay. Find my share screen.
Okay, so why are we talking about this? We last talked with council about resuming in-person meetings on May 4th, and things have shifted for the better. So staff wanted to reconnect with you all and see where you're at tonight in terms of resuming in-person council meetings, as well as providing an overall COVID-19 update. We also want to provide a follow-up to some guidance that you provided to staff on the electronic participation policy. And as I mentioned, things have shifted for the better in terms of COVID-19. And so we'll provide some updated health department data. And overall, the outlook is good as we continue to move out of COVID-19 recovery into this stage often referred to as our new normal. Next slide. So we're operating within a Tri-County Health Department simplified dial. Currently, we're in an observation period until August 16th. The state of Colorado is requiring face coverings for those 12 and older and not vaccinated, while in school, summer camps, prisons and jails, and healthcare settings. Masks are still required on public transportation despite vaccination status. No restrictions, capacity restrictions exist, let me try to talk. No capacity restrictions, including large and indoor gatherings exist right now. And the city is in the position where we encourage use of masks if you're not vaccinated, but certainly we have transitioned more into our new normal in city facilities. Next slide. So these next two slides include some important data that we've shared with council throughout COVID-19. The hospitalization rate, this number is actually changed. So if you want to keep track of this, it's gotten better. It's 0.262. So that is the number as of last week. And the new number is 0.262. So that's a positive continued downward trend in terms of where we're moving with hospitalization rate. If you go to the next slide, Mayor. We're continuing to see good progress with overall vaccination rate. Certainly, I think all of us would like to see it higher. I'm going to give you a few updated numbers. So on the first bullet for Adams County overall vaccination rate, that percentage is now 62.9%. For completed vaccination, at least one dose, and then the 2-dose rate is 55.8%. In terms of the Northglenn rate by census tract, that has shifted 31% to 64%. And then we've previously shared the employee self-reported rate in April, which is at 71.3%. Any questions on any of that data? That's all based on health department data, Tri-County Health Department. Okay. We'll move into the next slide, and I'm going to turn this over to Joanna Small, our city clerk, to provide you with an update on what other cities are doing right now in terms of meetings.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So staff surveyed other municipalities in the area, and so this slide shows that of the cities in Adams County, Arvada, Brighton, Thornton, and Westminster are all meeting in person. Aurora, Commerce City, and Federal Heights are currently meeting remotely. However, there's a footnote there. Commerce City indicated last week that they will be resuming in-person meetings in the near future. And then also related to Northglenn, we surveyed cities in the metro area. So that table indicates that Broomfield, Centennial, Inglewood, Golden, Littleton, and Wheat Ridge have all resumed in-person meetings. Denver and Lakewood are still meeting remotely. There was one city in the metro area that indicated that for them with hybrid meetings, their feedback was that it increased the likelihood for technical challenges. As a reminder, the city has the necessary equipment to make hybrid meetings work. And another bit of information that we found was that most cities are continuing to offer remote participation for public comment, even when they're back to meeting fully in person. And that's for the convenience of the community and to also increase public participation. So I'll turn it back over to City Manager Greyer.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm not going to read all the bullets on this slide, but the purpose of this slide is to remind you of the steps that council took in issuance of an emergency declaration that is still current. And so as part of council's decision of when to go back to in-person meetings, staff's recommending that council consider a resolution to terminate the emergency declaration. And right now that is scheduled for July 19th with resuming in-person meetings on July 26th, which I'll talk about a little bit more here on the next slide. So we're providing 3 options for council's consideration and feedback tonight. The first option is to remain virtual until September, which is current council direction. This is aligned with the Tri-County Health Department observational period that will lift on August 16th. And if council decides to continue this current direction, staff would recommend keeping the emergency declaration in place. Option 2 would be to resume in-person meetings on July 26th. And this would be a phased approach, starting with the DE&I workshop that is scheduled for council on the 26th. This would also include a council chamber dais reboot mini orientation that would take place prior to the meeting on August 9th. Something that I've heard from many of my peers is, and was recommended by Mayor Leidy, is that doing that mini orientation really helps everyone reorient to the technology. You've been using technology within your homes, and now we're shifting physical spaces. And so that type of mini reboot would be helpful. This would involve council and staff being in person, and the public would have the option of in-person or virtual, given the interaction that we've had with staff and to our city clerk's earlier comment about the virtual capabilities that we're equipped with, we would be able to provide that benefit to the community. And then option 3 is a hybrid of in-person and virtual. So this would be that council would have the option of in-person or virtual. Public would have the option of in-person or virtual. And staff would recommend that we keep the emergency declaration in place with this option. But certainly we're open to feedback on any of these 3 options or an additional option if you are thinking of one as we discuss these. Next slide. So a couple what ifs for you to think about. What if I want to wear a mask? We certainly encourage everyone to wear a mask if they feel more comfortable as we shift physical settings. And then if I'm not ready to go back, this is where we can dive into the council's electronic participation policy a little bit more here in a minute, and we can touch on that piece. I'm vaccinated, but others are not. Council can agree to plexiglass dividers, mask wearing, limit in-person public attendance. If you believe that's necessary, it would be important with this 3rd bullet to really have a sense if this is of continued concern to any council members as we talk about this topic this evening. So we're going to shift into the electronic participation policy. Council, when we had this discussion back in early May, had asked staff to look at ways to consider more flexibility. If I'm recalling the terminology correctly in the general direction from council. So we'll get to that piece. In non-emergency situations, our current policy, council can vote on legislative matters, but not quasi-judicial matters. And Corey's on hand and can discuss why the policy was designed as such. The current policy is really intended to be infrequent or occasional substitution for physical attendance. So in the staff memo, this is one area where I've elevated that this would be an opportunity for council to consider greater flexibility. I believe the number, as you see here, is no more than 4 posted city council meetings, including study sessions per year. So that's an area that council can consider changing if you'd like. And then there's currently a clause within the policy that allows council members to request additional approval for meetings, but that requires overall council approval for that piece. Overall, there was, as I mentioned, a desire for greater flexibility based on, I believe we had discussed with council the city staff flexible scheduling remote work policy that night. And next slide. So based on that initial discussion, most of the boards and commissions have been following city council's lead and meeting virtually. 3 are currently meeting in person or using a hybrid option. We have unfortunately had some challenges with technology with a couple that I think maybe one of you have experienced with CCPP specifically, but that's part of working in that virtual space. And then, certainly council, we relayed to the different boards and commissions that council's having this discussion tonight. And we'll, based on council direction, reach out to our boards and commissions and see how they'd like to move forward as we move out of this pandemic. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, comments. Ultimately, we're looking for direction based on how we framed the 3 options for you this evening.
Okay, looks like we have quite a few hands. Councilmember Duran Malika.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I'm looking at that option 3, that hybrid in-person and virtual option is the one I think I'm leaning towards. But one of the questions that I had is, so if we go with option 3, we would need to keep the emergency declaration in place because of the policy we have in place. Is that correct?
Essentially, that's correct.
Okay. Or is there any way we could change our policy? Or does the emergency declaration serve any other purposes besides just this meeting situation?
Corey, do you have any perspective on that? I mean, I think it comes down to it depends from my perspective. Right now, the way the electronic policy is written, it's, and I think it goes to depending on what type of flexibility council would want outside of the emergency piece of it. I think maybe we can better respond to that as this discussion unfolds and we get direction from council on what you'd like to see.
I think that's right, but I would say that the significance of the emergency declaration probably applies most to quasi-judicial matters. And in the absence of an emergency declaration, my recommendation is always going to be that quasi-judicial hearings be done in person because there are due process considerations that it's my opinion anyway, that we put the city at more risk of a challenge on any quasi-judicial matters if the hearings are virtual or hybrid in the absence of an emergency declaration.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So yeah, that probably needs to be refined a little bit how we move forward, but I would be for option 3.
Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question about the option 3. And I'm not leaning towards option 3, but if we were to go that route, would that be forever? Like we have this option of hybrid meetings, or would it be on a later agenda as a discussion, or is that just the way it would be forever?
That would be up to council. And I think the intent behind it, some councils and Joanna could share more based on what she's heard. They want to have that flexibility of being able to remote in. So Corey just mentioned a key piece that creates an issue in terms of participation in quasi-judicial matters. But given that we're in this new normal, it's open to council discussion and how you interpret your current electronic policy and what you'd like to see moving forward.
Okay, well, I guess that's something that anyone who's going for option 3, I'd kind of like to hear what they think about that. But for me, I'm definitely for option 2. I think we should be back in person. I love the idea of having the public have that option of being in person or virtual so that we can have more participation. And I also would support the hybrid option for boards and commissions because those aren't all elected officials. And I'd like to have that flexibility for those folks as well. But I am all for option 2.
So I want to point out, we do have more hands, but that combination of any of these little asterisks at the bottom, because I think we may end up with something like that, right? Because, I think we have a lot of questions around option 3. It's not my favorite, but if we now have the technology to do a virtual meeting as opposed to when we drafted the electronic participation policy, it was going to be over the phone. We didn't really have the technology in place. And that was meant for kind of those emergencies, very less frequent. Now that we have the technology, I could see us amending our policy. And I just wanted to go back to, because option 2 is my favorite. And there's a couple of reasons, because I think that the DEI workshop would be really, really, it would be more powerful if we were in person. And so if we have that in a virtual setting, I just don't know. I just don't know what the impact would be. I would really love to see us do that one in person. And so the intent of that was to have a couple study sessions in person to get our feet wet And then I really do believe that a mini orientation is needed. So, and that's the thing where it looks like if council wanted to do option 1 and wait, we would still want to do some sort of reboot or mini orientation prior to being back in the swing of things. So I can see how some of these might start to be combined. So, you know, as you're providing input, don't be afraid to kind of mix and match, I guess, would be the thing I would recommend. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to option 2 because I do think the in-person meetings are much more, I don't know, powerful. Just there's a lot of positives that come out of that. But I have a question, and then maybe this is going to lead into some kind of a combination thing. But the question is, if we do go to in-person meetings whenever we do, and it sounds like that means boards and commissions are going to follow that, you know, same timeline. But what about task force? Right now, I'm only really aware of the homelessness task force, but I know there are, you know, people from outside of Northglenn, different agencies all over the area. And it seems like a burden to put on some of these people to try to have them all come and meet in person for this. So is a task force going to be treated the same as boards and commissions? And if so, then I think we should maybe let some of those boards and commissions decide for themselves or figure out some way that we can accommodate people who signed on when it was going to be all virtual and have been doing that all along. And, you know, maybe it would be enough of a burden that now they would, you know, just like drop off the committee or the task force or the board or whatever it is if they have to come and meet in person.
Heather, do you have a thought on that?
A couple of thoughts. That's certainly something that staff has talked about. And so, you know, Rupa could reach out to the homelessness task force, for instance, and see what their level of interest would be in remaining virtual. I think one of the pieces that was brought up in having this conversation is public access to the group. So Planning Commission, Park and Recreation Advisory Board. So we've highlighted that we've seen public engage with council virtually, and we recommending that you keep that. That's something that you know, boards and commissions would also need to consider. And so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that boards and commissions go completely virtual. I think if there's a way to add a public engagement option that's virtual, that would be a good thing. But then that would, you know, bring you back to the need to have members of a board and commission physically present in City Hall, i.e. council chambers, where they typically meet. So I think task forces, they're not formal advisory committees. They're not as formal as a board and commission. And so I think there's some greater flexibility on that front. But, you know, this is new territory for so many of us, and we're trying to figure this out as we move forward. So, you know, feel free to react and challenge thinking in terms of what I've tossed out to council, because there's no right or wrong answer. From my perspective, it's, you know, what works for the community. I can tell you that from a staff perspective, at a staff level, that is, there are certain meetings that I've decided to keep virtual, such as council prep meetings on Monday mornings, because they typically last 10 to 15 minutes. And so rather than having staff from different facilities travel to City Hall for a really quick meeting, it makes sense to keep it virtual. So I think in those instances where there's that opportunity, especially on a task force level, that seems to make sense. But I think the challenge you have with boards and commissions is that they're formal groups. And then you have that public interface that you want to have happen. So ensuring that public access is available is an important consideration. And Corey and Joanna, jump in here and offer any perspectives that you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm all in favor of coming back in person. Sorry, my son's dinosaur just fell off the desk. Okay, anyway, I'm all in favor of coming back in person. I'm actually really excited about it, and I agree with you, Mayor, that it would be really impactful to do the DEI training together in person. I think that definitely should happen. If I am really interested in option 2 as well as option 3. Option 3 mainly because I feel like the world has changed and the way that we do business has changed. For example, in the past, if I had, like a sore throat or something, or I was feeling a cold coming on, I might suck it up and come to council, right? Whereas like in this day and age, I think that anybody who's experiencing any sort of symptoms and feeling sick should frankly just stay home, right? And given that I have 2 young kids at home who are, they're germ factories, that means that I may be sick more than just 4 times in a year. And so maybe what I'm advocating for here is like, let's do option 2, but let's revisit our electronic participation policy and update it to the post-COVID world, right? So being a little bit more lenient now that we have the technology for council members who do need to utilize the video in option more frequently than perhaps, we did previously. And then to the boards and commissions piece, I definitely think that the hybrid option should be allowed. I think that we've got the technology to be able to record the meetings that we need to, and we should use it. And I felt this way even before COVID because, for example, when I sat on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, there were many meetings that I wasn't able to meet because I was out of town or I was covering for some work thing that I had going on, but I could have hopped on the phone and been a part of that meeting, right? Or I could have hopped into a Zoom and been a part of that meeting. The obstacle there for me was having to physically be in the room. And so I think that we've got a lot more flexibility now with technology and we don't have to be as rigid. So I think that we can play with things a little bit more, but I do want us to come back in person, and whether we go with option 3 or whether we go with option 2 and look at the electronic participation policy and how we might revise that, I'm good with both of those things. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa.
Thank you, Mayor. I am definitely leaning a little bit more strongly towards option 2. Just from my experience, it really makes a difference to be able to speak to people face to face and to have that energy in the room, as everybody's been saying. So I'm really echoing that. I do agree that a hybrid option would be good, but there's definitely some difficulties that I've seen even just through the CCPP board in terms of maybe the technology wasn't as great in the Justice Center, but being able to hear people who were virtual versus the people who were in person and then communicate between the 2 groups sometimes provided some difficulty in some people wanting to speak and other people speaking at the same time because they didn't realize somebody else was talking, and it was a little bit difficult. We did have one snafu. It was probably just the exception to the rule because there was a power outage. So the technology wasn't working, and it was an important meeting. It was supposed to be an important meeting that pretty much got canceled because of that. It's just something to think of, playing devil's advocate here. I would hope that maybe it would be a strong leaning towards option 2 and everybody would want to come in person, but that if there was some exception, looking at Mayor Pro Tem Wilford with a baby, for someone to be able to have that option to tune in virtually if they are sick or are out of town or have some real, good reason to not be able to attend in person, then maybe that's the hybrid that we look at. And absolutely, I think providing that option for boards and commissions and so forth to be able to decide that for themselves. They should be able to vote on it as a board or commission and decide if they want to continue with a hybrid option. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
I'm good with option 2. I think it would be fun to get out of the house. But I do want to review during a study session our policy on that. I think that as Mayor Pro Tem said, the world has changed drastically since COVID. And I think that our intentions for our virtual meetings have changed too. Now as a council, we all understand that sometimes things get in the way and we still want to be involved and we still need to be involved. So I would like to bring that back to a study session and look at it. So I am actually in favor of 2 and leaving an option open for 3. I would like to know that if we resume in person, there was a comment on the slides, and I'm sorry, I'm looking for it, about glass partitions and things like that. When does that conversation come up? Because the 26th is, oh, wow, we're not even in July. See, I'm still having issues with date and time. The retired life. So, I would like to have a further discussion about that. I am good with coming back on the 26th of July. My vacation will be over. But I do want to have a conversation around what we're going to do to be proactive coming into the winter months. We have no ideas. From what I understand, I have left Julie totally alone for at least 6 months now. But from what I understand, Colorado is one of the states with the highest percentage of that COVID deviant. And so, you never know what's going to happen during the winter months. I'd like to know what we're going to do as far as, do we need glass partitions? How do we all feel about it? I really need a partition between Joyce and I because we tend to fight during it so much. I will miss seeing everybody's face because, like we talked about before, it's nice to see people's reactions and people's faces when we're talking to them, and we can't see those when we're in the office or on the dais. But I am for 2 with reviewing of 3. So I guess what I'm asking you for is I'm good with 2, but I'd like to keep the hybrid method going until we can review and go over our policy regarding virtual meetings with council. I don't think 4 is going to end up being enough, and I think we're going to need more.
Oh, I was like 4. What is happening? I get it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
4. I think we have to really look at.
Check me just a second. So Becky, to your point, I've actually, I would love it if we could keep the grid and mute everybody, but because the raising hand feature is amazing. Everyone has finally figured it out, and it provides, because when everyone is on the side, it's just hard to see. And so I also would love the tandem view, but that's anyway. We want to make sure we hear from every council member. This is a pretty important issue. So Councilmember Downing.
So I've been listening to everything, and I will tell you purely selfishly, and it's just purely selfishly, that I would love to stay virtual. It's just a selfish thing. I don't really want to go into it, but I just love virtual, but I think I would lean towards 3, the hybrid. But if everybody wanted to go back, I'm okay. With it. But I just, I guess I would lean to 3 because I know I'm the only one that just wants to stay here and and stay virtual, even though I'm not home all the time. You know, I'm not telling you I'm not, you know, but I like the virtual meetings. As far as the boards and commissions go, I think we should give them the option, whatever they want to do. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Favor 2 and a hybrid of 3. Combination, let people have the option. You know, if you're sick or not feeling well, it's better to be a part of it as opposed to not. And you know, most of us will be there, and you know, we've mastered the technology to where if somebody isn't sitting in the chair on the dais, that doesn't make their voice any less heard or opportune. And so I favor the majority on this.
So, and Julie, I'll come back to you in a second, because what I'm hearing, and I see Corey looks like he wants to speak. You know, I'm hearing some 2 and some 3, but the 3 seems to be revisiting our electronic participation policy, not just blending it for a period of time, because I think there's 2 different things there. So Corey, do you want to jump in?
Just one thing, and that is for the boards and commissions. A couple of our boards do act in a quasi-judicial capacity, specifically the Liquor Licensing Authority and the Planning Commission. So to the extent that those boards have quasi-judicial public hearings, if they want to create their own flexibility, certainly that's acceptable. But I would have the same recommendation for those quasi-judicial hearings, which is that they should be in person.
So Corey, if we, because I think it makes perfect sense to revisit our electronic participation policy, can we include the boards and commissions, or do they just automatically fall under that?
You can actually do it either way. You could include in your policy applying it to them, or you could give them the authority to create their own policies.
Okay. So what I heard a lot of round 1 was that, yes, the world has changed. Yes, we have new technology and capabilities, and we should revisit in a study session or work session or whatever our electronic participation policy, but that there is support for number 2. Julie, do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, sure. And so I have no reservations about going in person. I was advocating for that back in May. But what I really want to, I think, just stress is, I think, and a lot of us, I think, are all on the same page with there has to be a hybrid option moving forward, regardless, because of life, really, moving forward. And so maybe it's a new baby, maybe it's a sick parent, maybe it's your kid gets quarantined for a week because of COVID. I mean, that's what I'm anticipating, a lot of quarantines in the fall, just so you know. And so, you know, we're going to, you know, life's going to happen. And so we have to figure out what a hybrid option looks like. I don't think it needs to, I don't see the reason why we should have to extend our emergency declaration. I would rather just look at the policy, revise it, and move forward from there. It's just, we have to have that option available for folks. So.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at. So thank you for being more articulate there. That I don't think we would have to keep that, but we have to revisit the policy for sure. And so I'm going to go back really quickly to that screen, just so everyone can see it, because there were some dates on there. So this workshop on the 26th would be the first one. And then, you know, but I think to Councilmember Brown's point, when, Heather, would you like to have the conversation about, I mean, we could do it right now, you know, what we need to have in place, protection-wise, routines, procedures, in order to make that happen?
It would be helpful to have that conversation now, because we'd have the time leading up to the session on the 26th is at the Justice Center. That DE&I training is scheduled there. So council would be looking at being in person in a study session format on August 2nd, and then for a regular meeting on August 9th. So we need some lead time to be able to figure out, you know, based on any input, if you want plexiglass on the dais. We just need time to figure that out. So direction would be helpful tonight.
I know our dais is very tight, so plexiglass, we're gonna feel like we're on these little boxes, but if that's, I know that, I've, at the very beginning of this, I have always been watching the data really closely, so I appreciate you including the data in the presentation, because that helped me feel a little better. And report after report is good. And so that's making me feel more confident. I know that there's a new study out of Cleveland, I'll ask Julie about separately, but around if you've had COVID, that you have a longer immunity than they once thought. So I was like, wow, I've had it and I'm vaccinated, so I'm ready to go. Let me out. I'm coming. But that's just my personal comfort level. I do know that different school districts have already made declarations of no masks, no hybrid learning, no quarantine process. It'll just be a process as a cold. So, some school districts have already made that statement and put that policy out for the fall. I obviously, from the very beginning, we've been spending our time in close relationship with the health department, and we will continue to do so. So I don't know if we just put protocols in place for the current level, knowing that we would change the protocols as things shift. Because currently protocols are going by the wayside. So what do other people think? I mean, Coors Field was wide open today. Opening day 2.0. Councilmember Brown.
I don't even know if I can ask this question, but if we're willing to share, are we all fully vaccinated? Or is that a question that I'm not even allowed to ask? Mr. City Attorney.
You can ask, but people are under no obligation to answer.
Wink at her if you are.
Touch your nose if you're fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
I'm really more interested in Joyce and Meredith because I sit right next to them.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. All right. And for those of you who have a question, I am fully vaccinated.
Okay.
I'm going to keep you guessing.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
I like it.
I already know.
Well, why ask me then?
I just wondered if that was a concern for anybody. I'm almost over my paranoia. I've discovered a new one. But I'm just curious because if the public is going to come back, that may change my response. Is COVID over? That might be a Julie question, I really haven't given COVID much thought in the last month. Well, ever since my 2 weeks after my second shot. So I don't know. We can't keep this conversation going too long because my brain is going to bring up more questions, So just fair warning.
Okay, so we're done. No, I'm kidding. Councilmember Duran Mullica.
Okay, let's speak very quickly and close this conversation out. So we love you, Becky. I honestly think COVID is going to be with us for a very long time moving forward. It's something we're going to have to learn to live with. The biggest risks are to those that are unvaccinated populations, and based off of the exercise we just did and just previous conversations, I feel very confident going into our chambers. I think one of the biggest conversations we need to have is when someone's feeling ill, really encouraging them not to come in. Our dais is tight. And so I know that we've had folks, previously before this, it was like, oh, I have a runny nose, I have a cough, whatever, I'm still going to go to the meeting because that's like my job. But, if we have a hybrid option, I really don't want you at the meeting. Things like that, having that conversation of don't come in sick, that would be great. But I don't know if we need the partitions per se. I think if there are individuals who feel concerned, you know, mapping is always an option to keep yourself safe. You know, and that's something that people could continue to do and if they choose to. But I mean, I feel like the policies we set in place should be some that we could live with for some time, because yeah, COVID's going to be around, and then before you know it, flu's going to be back. So it's right around the corner.
Yeah, I know.
Thank
Well,
you.
some of the things I was thinking about, Julie, that because I agree with you, I don't think the partitions are necessary, but it's because we're side by side facing that way, right? It's the engagement with the public. And so I would recommend things like fewer chairs spaced out apart so we don't hold those crazy packed events in council chambers. We find other locations for that. And that's in the future, we probably will use our beautiful facility, community room and theater. And so it probably won't be necessary, but that would be something like, if we knew it was going to be packed, we would change locations because that's really unhealthy. Those youth awards that one time, it was standing room and everyone in the hallway. I was like, no, that's too tight. And then the handshaking. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So when we do awards, I don't know about it's so nice. And the thing is that when I go to events now, people are back to handshaking. Nice to meet you kind of thing. So maybe hand sanitizer. Exactly. Hand sanitizer just there. And so maybe we take a little squirt as we walk to the front to take photos with residents. And then they have to do the same as they come up. I mean, hand sanitizer is not a terrible thing. We've all gotten used to it. There's some lovely scents as well. So I would think some things like that we're going to have to change. I don't know if we need an official health screening, kind of like Julie was saying. Can we self-assess, or should we have to like check our temperature walking in the door? I don't, just be responsible. And if you feel like crap, make a different choice, I guess. Wow, that wasn't appropriate language. I apologize. If you feel poorly, don't come in. But I think some of the interaction with the public, probably we may need to make some changes there. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think the concerns that I do think after listening to everybody's comments that we do need to change something about our electronic participation so that there's a little bit more flexibility for people not to come in, because again, if you aren't feeling well, but you feel it's important to participate in the meeting, then you're kind of stuck. You have to make, neither decision is good. So I do like that. I think the concerns I have with going back to full in person or something more close to what we had, pre-pandemic, is that even though I'm vaccinated, I know I can be carrying the virus if I've been exposed to it. And then I could give it to a resident or someone who hasn't been vaccinated. And the same is true if we have residents sitting in a meeting for whatever reason, they could be exposed by someone else, another resident in the meeting or anything like that. So I do think that it would be a good idea to try to figure out some ways to minimize some of those kind of situations or problems. And it is surprising. The handshaking is coming back. I feel so comfortable doing things outside with the weather being as nice as it is, that I don't even think about it. If someone, wants to meet or whatever, I could give them a hug or shake their hand. But once we're closed in the city council chambers for hours, especially in the winter, I just, the germs are floating around in the air for people who are unvaccinated, or if it's a cold or a flu, that makes it easier for people to get sick. So I just don't know what the option is in terms of minimizing that problem. But I'm, okay with whatever we come up with as a group, or if we have a further discussion on it. in terms of coming back in person. And I do look forward to that July 26th meeting.
To Catherine's point, Heather, have we considered or looked into the air filtration in that space, like the airflow?
Offhand, I would need to I would say no. I can have a conversation with Kent and I can see what options Tony could look at. You know, we have the challenge of it's an older facility, but I'll talk with staff and we'll figure out something to help with airflow. I know those of you who have experienced that room have also experienced the hot temperatures in that room. So we'll see what we can do to make it more comfortable and keep the air flowing for not only temperature reasons, but also more importantly, just for what we've talked about tonight.
Yeah, and there's also, you know, circling back to in-person meetings, you know, security would come back. And so, you know, it's not like we can just have all the doors wide open. So there's a lot to consider. Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add that I'd feel comfortable going back without plexiglass. Like I worry about just being really enclosed and not being able to just lean to my left and talk to Randall if I wanted to. Instead, I'd have to go behind it. So yeah, I'm for that. And I agree with you, Mayor, about, you know, the little things that are almost becoming common sense these days about the hand sanitizer and all of that. So yeah, I'm good with all of that. And also I wanted to just add that after listening to everybody, I'm totally for this hybrid approach in certain circumstances. I guess I was kind of worried that, you know, if we just had the option, you know, maybe I don't feel like going to City Hall today, so I'll just be virtual. But, you know, if you've got legitimate reasons, I'm for that. And I guess that would take revising our policy. So I just wanted to add my support for that. But I'm comfortable going back in person, no mask, no plexiglass. Thanks.
Thank you. I know, and because I do think we can keep moving. I think we have given Heather a lot of ideas, but we also know that your team has done a great job of getting City Hall up and running and all of our other buildings. So how about if you put your brain trust together and let us know what you come up with.
I will do that. Thank you for the direction tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown, you got 30 seconds.
30 seconds, that's all I need. Heather, can we look at putting plexiglass on the podium or something?
Oh, that's a good idea.
You know what I mean? Just as an added layer of protection. That's who I'm more, I don't mean it to sound like that, but that's what I'm more worried about is public interaction. I don't doubt my fellow council members. I mean, if we could just look at it, if everybody else is against it, then.
Is the distancing not enough between the dais and the podium? I mean, we could look at pushing the podium back a little bit.
Okay.
Or if council says put plexiglass on, we can look at that.
I mean, I'm good with pushing it back. We are going to, it sounds like, look at removing some of the seats from the room, you know, so that we have extended social distancing or something to that effect. I'm good with pushing it back just a little bit.
Okay. How about we look at something like that, and then staff, the brain trust, as the mayor refers, then we'll figure out as we progress in meetings, when we have award presentations and things like that, how we can make sure we manage those in a safe way. You know, hand sanitizer, remove some of the seating and all that good stuff, so that all of you are comfortable, as well as the public being comfortable.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, moving into our final item, Community Co-Production Policing Advisory Board Ward 4 member vacancy. So Rupa is here. I will pull up your presentation. You can take it away.
I am back, Mayor and City Council, to close out the show tonight. So we are here to discuss the Ward 4 vacancy on the Community Co-Production Policing Advisory Board. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in the ordinance, the makeup of the membership includes 13 members. And 4 of those members include a resident representative from each of the 4 wards. There is an additional 14th member who serves as an ex officio non-voting member. So essentially the voting members are the ones that make recommendations to council, which is one of the purposes of the CCPP advisory board. So the reason why we're having this discussion is because there is a current vacancy that was created on June 14th when council member Lukman Iramasa took the oath of office. And per the ordinance, we have 45 days to fill the vacancy. So that that deadline is on July 29th. And in your memo, we have a target date of the July 19th council meeting to fill that vacancy, since July 26th is that DEI workshop, and that's considered a special meeting. So just a quick background on some of the current boards and commissions. So the Historic Preservation Commission, in its ordinance, it does not consider whether an individual is a council member as qualification. It just stipulates that the 7 members have to be residents and have a demonstrated interest in history, culture, etc. And then the Vale Board, in the ordinance, it states that it's made up of 5 regular members and 1 alternate. No more than 2 of those members may be city council members. And then so we have 3 different options. Option 1 really considers the Ward 4 council members to appoint from the previous application pool. So the original application period closed on January 15th, and Ward 4 received 19 applications and 6 were interviewed. So if option 1A was picked, council members Wilford and Lukman Iramasa would choose from the 18 remaining applicants, and how many ever they want to interview is up to them, but they would choose from that applicant pool. Or a new applicant pool can be generated under option 1B via social media and Ward 4 resident postcards. The downside for this option is that there is very limited time to do that outreach, and we do have limited staff resources with 1 member of our communications team on vacation, and the cost would be $1,600 for those postcards. The other 2 options, so option 2, and this is something that we've heard from some council members, and you heard it from public comments as well tonight, to allow Councilmember Lukman Iramasa to remain as the Ward 4 representative until the November election. If that council member is elected, then a vacancy would be created, and that vacancy can be filled following either of the options in option 1. Or the last option is to allow the council member to remain the CCPP Ward 4 representative until the 3-year term expires. And of course, there are other options that council may have considered that that council can discuss tonight. Our recommendation is option 1A. We feel that, and Corey can go into this in detail as well, that options 2 and 3 right now are inconsistent with the language of the current ordinance, because it does not contemplate a council member acting as a voting member of the CCPP board. In addition, option 1A is also time efficient because it utilizes an already existing large applicant pool that the original application period created. And with that, I can open it up for, So for next steps, if option 1 is selected, then we would have that approval process on July 19th.
So Corey, I have a question. I know we have a lot of comments. I wanted to add, because we did have 2 residents for public comment, but I also had a 3rd CCPP member reach out and express the desire to not fill the seat. It wasn't, so I think it's an option that's not on here. So I wanted to talk through. I see that there are some options on here, but this board member said, could we just not fill it in the event that, whatever happens with the election? And I have been doing some thinking about it and talking to other people. And one of the thoughts is, can the ordinance be amended so that we're not in violation of it to meet the needs of sort of a unique situation? And there's a couple of reasons I would advocate for that. Because sometimes, you know, I get into a position where it's like, do we advocate for the process or do we advocate for the person? And I think there's a couple pieces here where it overlaps, because Shannon has done such amazing work already, and this board is in its infancy. And so she did a lot of the training that a new person would need to kind of back up and catch up. But also the advocating of 3 of her co-board members, I think, makes it unique. And it's also a shorter time period. And so I just was wondering if there was a way to amend the ordinance to change the amount of days. So instead of 45 days, it's, I don't know, less than 6 months or whatever. So I just didn't know what you thought about that, or what you thought about other options than the ones in the presentation.
Well, I think my advice has always been not to violate your rules, but if you don't like the rules, to change them. So in this context, I think if council wanted to change the rules to meet this circumstance, I think you'd have to go to 180 days, because that gives time. It would keep the position vacant, but that gives time for the certification of the November election, so that council would know. And, you know, but remember that 180 days is going to be in place for every vacancy thereafter. So even though it's going to be done for this special circumstance, that will be, the council will have 6 months to fill a vacancy in the future.
On this particular board, because this is a board specific ordinance. Okay. And then, and I guess I would want to point out that it's kind of it's not a common thing. I mean, it has happened in the past. It's happened in the past more with an actual election as opposed to an appointment. So just something to think about. Councilmember Brown, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things that we're assuming. And unless I've missed a notification, we do not know that our council member is running for election or running for the role. It was not anything that we asked. So are we assuming that she is, or has she stated her intentions? Or are you stating it for her tonight?
Good question.
I know. We're just going on like, we got a seat for you, sister. My other question is, could she not retain her seat and become a non-voting member? So she would not be able to vote, much as Randall does not vote as a city council person. I think that it is really important that we would be setting a precedent to alter our other boards and commissions too.
It's just this one.
I know. But in the future, if there is something that would happen, I understand. I totally get that she's done a wonderful job, but could that seat remain vacant? Or, with a non-voting member, so that she could attend the meetings, but she would be a non-voting member.
There is one ex officio non-voting member, and that is what's contemplated by the ordinance. So the only way that would happen is to displace the existing non-voting member.
No, I would never do that. I think Randall's done a great job too. It was a thought. I don't think that, as much as I appreciate the work, I don't think she can stay a voting board member. But I'm willing to be swayed.
Well, Becky, how do you feel about what I just mentioned, the changing the ordinance from 45 days to 180? So that it's just vacant.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, I was just wondering. Randall, I see your hand. I think.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't have a problem, and I don't mean to phrase that in the half positive. But I don't have a problem with Shannon remaining on the CCPP board in the short term until realignment, as we will do maybe with all our committees per se, after the November election and at the start of the first of the year. One of the requirements of the board were extensive training, and this is everybody that's been on the board, and this was a prerequisite to applying for this board, is that the candidates agreed to attend weekly. I mean, we've been meeting weekly for a little more than 2 months in terms of familiarization with policing procedures and things along those lines. I would be okay if she remained in this role until the end of the year, and then we open it up for, whether it be the previous applicants or bring in a new crop. We could certainly do that. But, and it's not about the good or not good job she's done. She's done a fantastic job. It's not the merit of her work. It's the idea that it's an experienced person that has been through the process. And I think if she acts in her representation of Ward 4, as opposed to her city councilwoman hat, then I think that could be a smooth transition for the next, 5-6 months.
Corey, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, the ordinance does not contemplate a sitting city council member acting as the Ward 4 representative, only as the ex officio. So the proposal that the mayor was making, the position would be vacant. Certainly that doesn't preclude Councilmember Lukman Hiramosa from participating in the meeting. She just wouldn't be a voting member and would be essentially a very experienced member of the public while during the time the position was vacant between now and 180 days from July 14th.
Councilmember Downing.
As I was listening, I'm wondering if we were thinking about amending the ordinance. None of the other boards have a condition in there that they have to be, a vacancy has to be filled within a certain number of days. So maybe if we're considering amending anything, maybe it's changing the wording of when or how we fill the vacancy. Because, historic commission, I mean, we've had a vacancy for, say, a year, maybe the planning commission has a vacancy. So, and there's no mandate to fill it, within 45 days or whatever it might be. So that would be my offering, maybe think about something like that. So it's consistent with the rest of the boards.
Thank you.
I see.
I have 3 more hands. Heather, did you want to say something first?
Just a point of clarification, Joanne, I don't know if you were going to share this as well. Parks Board does have a 45-day requirement.
Okay. Well, I didn't.
One exception, so I just wanted to share that.
So I have Councilmember Goff, and then Duran Malika, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I think your idea about extending the time might be like the best compromise or whatever, the best solution for this situation, this unique situation. I would just have the wording be that that it gives the council up to 180 days to fill a position on that on the CCPP, because in other situations, we might be able to, and everybody's okay and everything's working smoothly, we might be able to do it much more quickly than that. But in this particular case, it just kind of leaves that open. I would say either that or, the option 1A that was given, just simply because Shannon was doing a great job on the CCPP, and as one of the reasons why she was probably selected to be on the city council is she wants to continue on city council. She'd do a great job there. But so then you'd need somebody, somebody's going to have to fill that position, whether it's now or later. It just would be consistent with the other boards. But I do think that the 180-day extension would also work. So I'm fine with either one of those options.
I like your up to addition. That makes sense. And Corey's nodding. Councilmember Duran Mullica.
I guess I have a clarifying question. So I'm okay with everything that Catherine just suggested, but so she could remain on the board, but she would not be a voting member, or do we have to change that part of the ordinance as well?
I think what is being contemplated is that this is preserving her ability to essentially fill the vacancy in the event she is not a city council member after the November election. So during the time from now until November, she would not be on the board. That would be inconsistent with the ordinance. But it's allowing her to continue in the event she is not a city council member following the November election.
Okay, sorry, I'm still confused. So from now until the election, is she a voting member or not a voting member?
She's not on the board.
She's not on the board.
No, the position became vacant when she was sworn in as a city council member.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That really helps clarify things for me. So I'm okay with making that extension so that she could not be on the board, but yet we could still fill in after the election to see what happens, I guess. Regardless, what I think this really does give us is time to figure out how are we going to fill vacancies specifically for the CCPP, because as Randall was pointing to, there's a huge training component that we are, expecting of these folks who are serving on this board. So I think that is probably, it's here, and we need to start figuring out what our process is going to be for onboarding new CCPP members. If, we may need to figure that out after the election, we may not, I don't know, but that's definitely up for discussion for them to figure out quickly. So I agree with the change that everyone's, I think we're all on the same train.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really glad that Julie asked that question because I was so confused, and now I'm definitely understanding what we're talking about here. I guess I just want to express the heartburn that I have about, I think the way that I initially understood the options was that Shannon would be able to fill the seat and have a vote until November, at which point we would figure out whether she was staying on as the Ward 4 member or whether she was transitioning off because, she was going to be continuing on in her council capacity. I was open to that, that idea of her maintaining her role and having the vote. The heartburn that I have is that Antonio and I spent, all of this time going through 19 applications so that we would have a Ward 4 person with a vote. And I have a lot of heartburn about the idea of Wards 1, 2, and 3 all having a vote, but Ward 4 not having a vote in this process. That feels really like it's a conflict in the way that we, in my eyes, in terms of the way that we initially contemplated setting up this board, right? Like each ward would have a vote. And so I guess I'm curious, is there a way to set it up so that we can amend, amend the ordinance to figure out a way so that Shannon can continue in her capacity or whatever it is and have a vote, because I don't want to lose that vote, but I also think, we are in a really unique situation. I mean, I can't imagine something like this happening every year, if not every other year, where we have somebody that we just appointed step onto city council. So I think we're in a really unique situation, and maybe we can figure out a solution to it. And I really agree that yes, Shannon has put in a ton of work, as has every other CCPP member in becoming up to speed. And to Julie's point, I think this really does illuminate, what is our process? What is our plan? I mean, I hate to say it this way, but if we have a CCPP board member that has been appointed that is all of a sudden unable to serve for some reason or another, how are we filling that role? And how are we bringing them up to speed, right, with all of the work that everybody else has done? I mean, these are also 3-year terms. So somebody could say, 3 years has been great, but I'm out. How are we bringing the next person into this board and setting them up for success? Not only them up for success, but also the board up for success. I don't know if I've totally muddied the waters here, but I just, again, I have a lot of heartburn about Ward 4 after we had 19 applications not having a vote there. That feels really inequitable. So if there's a way to remedy that for the short time, I'm really interested in what a solution could be.
So I appreciate that input. Before I go to the other hands, I was wondering if either Randall or Shannon wanted to speak to how the votes, you don't have to, it's all public meeting, but what the dynamic has been so far. Like, is that something that you also share a concern about? Or, because Shannon, you are a Ward 4 representative.
I'll start on that. And that's, a great point that Jenny brings up. There hasn't been battle of the wards so far in terms of territorial or turf battles or anything like that. It's been, if I didn't know where people were from, there'd be no distinguishing fact in terms of people representing a certain geographic area in the city by any means. We're putting together our bylaws, our voting procedures, and our next step is listening to a presentation on doing some community partnering with local policing from our resource navigator, right? So there hasn't been any turf wars or anything like that this interest is represented and this one isn't. And I would say to Jenny's point, if Shannon can't vote because of the statute on this or because of the ordinance on this, if Shannon can't vote and then Ward 4 doesn't have a vote, then Ward 4 could very quickly make their second choice or go through. They're very familiar with the people they've interviewed, I would think, and go through this. And if the point is not having representation, then 180 days is the max, not the minimum, right? And so I would think you'd be able to get somebody on relatively quickly. In terms of the process raised by Julie and Jenny in terms of what we're going to do in terms of people leave the committee or people resign and stuff, I think that's a different conversation that might want to start with CCPP, and then we can take that to council. I'm not sure that's an entire council agenda thing for tonight. I think that we can start, going through that in terms of, how can we get people brought up on the training and what kind of onboarding are we going to do on that committee? And then we're happy to share that with council and take suggestions on that. But I think that conversation could start organically within our own committee.
That makes sense. Shannon, did you want to say anything?
Sure. I've just been trying to listen to everyone's views and taking that all in and really listening to what everybody has to say. Of course, I knew the role that I was taking on with City Council. I was also, like everybody said, I was also hoping to continue on the board until the elections are certified. So yes, I do plan on running. It's a matter of what is consistent and not inconsistent with the wording, and I understand all of that. It was a lot of training, so it does require a lot of time and training that was already put in to getting to this point for sure. And I have some ideas on that moving forward, but that I do feel like Councilman Peterson said that's more probably of a board discussion, or it should be a part of the board discussion on how they want to fill those roles. But I do have some ideas on that, that if I could give the input, I would. But I was advocating for option 2. And hoping for that option, just because it's such a short term between now and elections. And I have put in the work and have that base to kind of help the board keep going. But then I also am confused because it sounds like, well, the other option would just be to kind of leave it vacant until after the elections, and then at that point make that decision. So that also does make sense. There haven't been any turf wars, but we're kind of new and starting, and it's a collaborative effort. So I don't really see that happening. I think everybody's working together for the greater good, so to speak. I understand as Ward 4 representative, I would love to continue to represent my ward in that capacity until elections are certified as well. But I'm just like everybody else. It's, a little confusing to see if there was any way to temporarily amend the ordinance. I don't know if that's a thing or if that's something that is not even reality. If there's a way to temporarily amend it. Other ideas for the vacancy, up to 100 days is great, but it could maybe say something along the lines of 45 days unless there's extenuating circumstances. In that case, then you have up to 180 days. That's just mincing words, I think. But that is my opinion right now. Advocating for 2, but I do understand that it's a group decision, and then also inconsistencies with the ordinance and how that would be. It doesn't quite say anything about a ward member being a council member, so there is precedent for other 2 boards, I guess, having a council member being a voting member on a board. But I don't think that it's something that should be amended permanently because it is a board of residents and a citizen board. And that's how it was set up. So I do understand that. And I've probably not helped at all by everything I've just said. But that's where I stand. I would love to continue to support the board and help it grow in the next few months. Considering around the time that elections would be certified, then that's going almost into the new year, which for the CCPP board will mean a lot of, work plans and things and elections happening for them as well at the beginning of the year. So the timing could be good if I am fortunate enough to continue in my seat in city council. And also maybe an opportunity for more training for the board as well. But that's a different subject.
Corey, do you want to respond to any of that before we move? There was a lot there.
Certainly. I guess I would say this. The city council spent a great deal of time talking about membership on this board and ultimately came to a point of having only an ex officio member. I would suggest in part because the nature of this board is to be an advisory board to the council. So you wouldn't have a city council member as a voting member on a board that is an advisory board to the council. If city council today wants to change that and allow the ward representatives to also be city council members, it could do so. I worry that that was inconsistent with how this was originally conceived, which is again advisory to the council. And I look at this as not about a person, and I understand a lot of this conversation is about a particular person, but about a process and about the sort of the sanctity of the CCPP board that this council set up. But you are free to amend it as you see fit. But I would say I wouldn't recommend doing a temporary amendment solely for this person because this is about process and about the board. But that, again, if council directs me to do that, we'll do it.
Okay, thank you. We have more hands. Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Gosh, I've been writing down things and then it just changes as we have more discussion about this. So I would be in favor of the up to 180 days to fill the vacancy. But then I wonder if for some reason Shannon did not win, is she just automatically placed into that position? Because I'm sure that Shannon is great on it and I want her to have that position, but I don't know if that's necessarily fair to other residents who might be interested in filling that position. So it's vacant for up to 180 days, but then, so what happens after that? It sounds like it's contemplated that she would just fit back into that role. And so I'm not sure I agree with that. I was leaning towards revising the ordinance so that she could remain as a voting member. But then if that's not temporary, then we could have a situation where a city council member applies, and then how would the interview application process go in that situation? So I after all of this and kind of talking it through and thinking it through, I think I would be for amending the ordinance to read up to 180 days to fill the vacancy. But then I have the question about how that vacancy is filled after 180 days, whether or not Shannon wins, I guess.
So I think what I heard Corey say is that the spot is vacant right now, based on the ordinance. Like that's just fact. So if we don't fill it, then, after that, when we, before the 180 days is over, we would do an application process. I guess my thinking is based on her experience, she might be selected because she's already got the training. She's already, gone through some of the foundational pieces, but you're right. I mean, there is a risk that somebody else could come in and get appointed.
Okay, I was just worried that there was some automatic situation where she would just fit back in, and that didn't seem fair. But now I understand.
I don't think that's legal.
No,
I think that's what we're trying to do is make the best choice that keeps us legal and doing the right thing. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Hi. I think what we're trying to do is fit a square peg into a round hole. I listened to everybody, and I have to tell you, Mayor Pro Tem actually enlightened me to a couple things. First of all, we have to step away. Shannon, I think you're doing a great job. Please don't take this offensively, but we've had a couple meetings where we try to change process to fit into another process. I don't think that's the right thing to do. As I was sitting here thinking, residents move all the time. We cannot keep making exceptions based on who's in that role or, person's doing such a great job. We have to have a consistent, transparent process. And right now, our transparent process that we provided when setting this board up was that would not allow Shannon to keep this role. I don't feel anymore. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't feel that leaving the role vacant is the right thing to do either. I think that we promised or we made a commitment to our constituents that each ward would have a participating member in this CCIP. I've completely done a complete reverse on what I was thinking before. I think that we would be doing damage to our reputations because we're not staying consistent. We're changing things to accommodate unique situations. Well, what if the Ward 2 representative comes in next month and says, hey, I just put my house on the market and I'm moving, could I take that? I mean, you're opening a can of worms that until Antonio left didn't exist because we weren't forced to look at it. I think it's very important that we stay consistent. It was one of the things that, we really fought to stay consistent and transparent during the interview process for our new Ward 4 person. And I think we have to stay that way with this board. This board means a lot to the community and it means a lot to us. And I think that we need to follow the rules as much as and we need to do the right thing. When I say follow the rules, we need to do the right thing, and that's for the community. I have no doubt that Shannon has done a wonderful job and that she's trained, and I get it. I wouldn't want to give it up either. But unfortunately, like she said, when she put her hat in the ring for this city council position, she knew that there may be a conflict with CCIP. So with that said, unfortunately, I am leaning now towards filling the position with the remaining, with the other people that made the final cut. I'm pleased as punch to hear that Shannon is going to run for the Ward 4 seat, because I think that she brings a breath of fresh air to our city council meetings, and I really enjoyed having her on. But I honestly think that the seat needs to be filled. It can't stay vacant. I don't think that I don't think anything needs to be changed as far as, within 45 days. I'm going to advocate for filling that seat.
Okay. Councilmember Downing?
I've been listening very carefully to everything, and I'm wondering, one of the things that popped in my mind as I was listening to some of this was we might have the same situation in November. We may have, say Shannon wins the election, and I don't know if Randall's running or not, but if he does, and he wins, then maybe he wants to retain his position. I mean, of course, that would be a vote of the council, but still we may have the same problem again. So in the beginning, I was leaning towards the second option. But now the more I think about it, I really think, and I have to agree with Becky and Mayor Pro Tem, that we really need to fill this position with the next person that's there. Otherwise we need to be transparent. We have to, and it's not anything against the person, but we have to look at the position, and we just have to move forward and then see what happens in November. That's my thought, but I'm leaning that way.
Thank you. Councilmember Duran-Malika?
Yeah, really, I think that moving forward with 1A is probably the best option. I think this was a really good discussion, and I thought this was going to be a really clear agenda item, and it didn't turn out to be like that. So I think the discussion has been helpful. And really, the most fair, best way to move forward would be to follow with option 1A. Ward 4 will they'll have a vacancy filled, and with a Ward 4 individual who's, going to be fully a part of the board. And then we'll go from there. So yeah, I agree. 1A is what I was thinking. I'm not sure what others were thinking, if they wanted to do this whole postcarding application process again, but I figured it's been pretty recent. We could probably save the money and just do 1A.
Mayor Pro Tem Mulford?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've also really appreciated the discussion and the questions. I still, until recently, did not fully understand that the seat is vacant now. And, as I mentioned earlier, we had 19 people apply for this position. We have a lot of interest from the ward, and I know that I will have a really tough time standing up at our ward meeting next week and saying, we're not going to fill that role when there was so much interest. And I also have a really tough time standing up at our ward meeting next week and saying, Ward 4, yes, the board is congenial and there are no turf wars and everything seems to be going fine, but you don't have a vote there. Like, that just doesn't feel right to me. And it doesn't feel fair, and it doesn't feel like what we initially talked about as a council and agreed to set our board up as. So I do support moving forward with 1A. This is not at all where I started in the discussion or where I even came into the discussion at, but I do think it's important for us to separate the person from the position, just as we have with so many other positions, whether it be the homelessness coordinator or, even the clerk or the judge or anything else that we do. I think we have to do the right thing here. And I think it's important that if we have this vacancy that we get someone in now rather than waiting until November to see what happens so that they can catch up more quickly instead of waiting 4 more months and getting behind 4 more months. My hope is that they'll be able to make up that gap more quickly now than later on. So I'm in support of 1A.
Thank you. So I agree that this conversation has left me with a few more questions. So when Councilmember Downing mentioned other boards and commissions and there was only one, is that something we need to clean up? That only one, the Parks and Rec Board, is the only one that has an ordinance language like this? Is that something we need to clean up, or do we just leave it that there's only 2 boards in the city that have any position filling requirement? Because we have had positions open, and we just, like CAB had positions open, and it's like nobody knew until somebody said something. So I guess I'd like to maybe propose that either staff takes a look at it, or we have a study session where we look at all of our boards and commissions a little more clearly and kind of understand, I don't know, what the language is in each of them, so that because if our goal is to be consistent, and if our goal is to not set precedent to cause trouble in other boards or commissions or task forces, then we should probably take a look, because it sounds like we are in an inconsistent place right now. So that's the one thing that I think this conversation elevated for me was, wow, we should probably have a better understanding of this as a council. And then, I do think it was important that we had the conversation, because we did have, 3 CCPP board members come forward and, mention their request. And I think we had a really thorough discussion, and a lot of council members, including Corey, brought us back to our original discussions, our original founding values about this board and what it meant to us and why we designed it the way we did. So unless someone wants to, strongly advocate for something else, I think I'm hearing that 1A is where we're headed. Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say that this was actually a really good conversation, and Councilmember Brown, when she explained that, I could definitely see that point of view in terms of thinking how important it is for us to have that transparency with the residents and with the community. So I agree with that. I do think that it's changed, for me being new, of course, and this being the first time it's ever happened. I'm really happy to bring something this difficult for you guys to discuss. Happy to be the guinea pig. But when it comes down to it, I want what's best for the community as well. So again, I think it was Corey who said, take the person out of it and let's go with the process and keep that clean. I've also changed my own mind, because I want what's best for the board and what's best for city council, regardless of what happens in November. So I just want to put that out there and thank you all, because it's really helped me understand how important it is to keep the process what it is. And I think ultimately that's what matters the most. So I would advocate for 1A to choose from the people that were the most qualified moving on. But I just thought I would throw that out there. So I really do appreciate it. It was a great conversation and helped me understand a lot more as well. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Oh yeah, I'm going to be really quick. I just want to thank Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa for her statement just now, because I was kind of the same way. I wasn't really sure I understood all the ins and outs and implications, and so I do support 1A at this point as well. But I also want to come back to your point, Mayor, about at some point looking at or taking a closer look at boards and commissions and how openings are filled and how just that whole process. I know the diversity board, the DICE board, does have a subcommittee that's looking at encouraging more diversity on the boards and commissions. And so they might come up with some recommendations, but if that's something that we could look at a study session, I would appreciate it.
I like that additional piece. That's kind of cool. I am interested to hear what they come up with. Okay, well, I think 1A is where we're headed. So, Rupa, you have an answer.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, I will email council members Wilford and Luke Miramasa tomorrow with all the applications from Ward 4, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. I do not see anybody on our call for public invited to be heard, but I will give a minute in case there is someone on the phone. No, I didn't think so. Okay. I hope you all have a great night. Happy 4th of July if I don't see you before then. There is no further business. We are adjourned.